Hey everybody, this is Joel Toppen, and in this video I'm going to show you some of the more advanced techniques that you can use in VASSAL. What I'm going to show you in this video is how to create a button that will dispatch a game piece from a deck into a precise location that you designate. Commonly this technique is used to put a draw card button into a hand window, so that when you click on that button, a card is drawn into your hand from the deck, saving you the trouble of having to open up your hand window and then open up the deck window and then dragging a card from the deck into your hand. This is a technique that can be very, very useful, but there's a little bit of work involved in this, and it's a little bit more advanced than the things I've showed you so far. Let me give you a quick example of what this technique will do. I've done some work here on the Navajo Wars module. One of the things I've done is in the spaces where drought markers can be placed on the map. Let me zoom in so you can see this real well. These spaces here, drought markers can be placed there, and what I've done is I've made it so that if you left click on there, it will automatically dispatch a game piece. Actually, it just generates a game piece there. And of course you can delete the game piece, and then later on if you need to add one there's your drought marker, and so forth. Well, a little bit more complex than that is when you have to take a piece from a deck or from a pile of available pieces. In other words, in the case where you don't have an infinite number of pieces, like in the markers tray, if there's a finite number of pieces and you need one piece taken from that location and placed in another location, what you can do is you can create a button to generate that effect. What I've done here in the module is I've made buttons in the family boxes so that when you go to place a man counter in the space provided for him in family A, all you have to do is left click on it and it dispatches a piece from the available stock that's kept in the out of play box. If we do that in family B, it sends a piece to the family B. The woman, if I click on her, it sends a piece from there. And that's what I've been working on in this module. Now, how did I go about doing that? Well, that's what I'm going to show you in this video. First thing that you want to do is you need to create the button. So what I've done here is, let's just look at the core of the module. This is the display from the editor window. And what I've been working from here is the main map window. I've created a bunch of @start stacks and decks. The women counters are kept in a deck called women, and there's exactly 8 pieces in that particular deck. Each of those pieces has a prototype associated with it, and the prototype is called women. So all the women counters will have all the traits that that prototype has. So if we look down here at the prototype definitions, you'll see I have one here for women, and there's several things in this. There's something to layer it on the map, and I'll show you what that's all about in another video. There's a return to deck function. That's what sends her back to the deck where the pieces are stowed. And then there's a send to location. Now what this send location trait does is it sends it to the family box according to whatever button is pressed. So if I press the button family A, she goes to family A. If I press the button from family B, she goes to family B. How do I get VASSAL to know which, how to send her to the right place? Well, let's look at the buttons themselves. So let's look at the @start stack here for the woman in family A. So family A's woman is an @start stack, and I have it one piece inside that stack, and that piece is the button. Now the button image that I've created is a PNG file that is exactly the same size as the space that the counter is going to go to on the map. It's 87 pixels by 87 pixels. I've created a border around the piece so that I can actually see where the piece is located. All right. For example, if I double click on the @start stack folder, it allows me to reposition the stack, and that shows me exactly where she is. She's right there. And if I use the Shift and Control keys while I move the arrow buttons around, I can move this counter around and reposition it. The reason I give the counter a border around it is so I can see exactly where it is, where I want to place it. Now, eventually what I will do is I will I'll take that piece, the graphic for that piece, and I'll edit it so it's an entirely transparent piece. That way it's invisible to the naked eye. Now if you're doing a draw card button for a hand, you probably want a graphic that says draw card. But in this case I'm using a transparent, or for now temporarily a semi-transparent piece. The button is actually a game piece, okay? And within VASSAL, VASSAL's going to handle this button just like it were a piece, like a counter. But what I've done to this is I've provided several different traits for it. First of all, there's a prototype associated with it. Woman button. All the buttons that are going to generate women are associated with a prototype. That's just a way for me to speed things up. So I'm going to look at that prototype really quick here. The woman button prototype. So basically everything in this prototype, consider it to be in the button as a part of the button's traits. First of all, I've given it a does not stack trait. This is very important. A does not stack trait allows you to do a couple things. You can make it so that the piece will move, can be selected normally, or you can make it selectable only when you hold a shift key or an alt key down, or you can make it so you can never select it. The only time you'd use never select is if the game piece's only function is to serve as a label. And sometimes I'll do that is I'll create a label and I'll make it as a game piece. I'll make it an invisible game piece that has a text label trait associated with it, and then I make it non-stackable, and I give it the never select function. And if you don't want the piece to move, you can have this drop-down box here. You can make it so the piece moves normally. You can make it so that it can move only if it's selected, or you can make it never. The only if selected, that's useful in games like Commands and Colors, where you're going to have terrain tiles that you want to be able to move around and select whenever you're creating the scenario, but in gameplay you don't want to be able to move that stuff. So what you'll do in those cases is you'll make it so the piece is selectable only when you hold the shift key down. So you have to shift and left click to select the piece, and you make it so the game piece moves only if it's selected. That way, you know, if you know what you're doing, you can move the tiles around, but in ordinary play, it's not going to be, you're not going to accidentally move tiles around. Well, for the buttons, what I do is I make it so the piece is selected normally, but the game piece will never move. That is a very, very important thing to do. I've created a layer for it. I can explain what that does in a future video. Well, shoot, I guess I'll explain it now. It might be helpful now. Within the main map window, I've created, if you right click on here, you can add map layering. It is one of these in here. Add game piece layers, right about halfway through. Add game piece layers. If I double click on the trait, basically I add these words in here, and the very topmost layer I create is going to actually be the bottommost on the map. I've created a layer called map. Pieces that are given the trait, the layer trait map, will appear lower and will only stack with other pieces that have the layer map trait. They will not. They'll appear lower than pieces with the markers layer trait. So if I tell a game piece to be layer markers pieces will actually hover over the map piece, and they pieces that are associated with one layer will not stack with another layer. So all the map pieces will stack, all the markers pieces will stack, enemy pieces, player pieces, and card pieces will stack. But none of these will stack with another layer. So map will be at the bottom, then markers on top of that, then enemy, then player, and then cards are the topmost layer. So what I've done for the button is I've given it a marker trait. Go almost all the way down to the available traits, you add marker. If I add that to it, what you end up with is something with two fields. You can add a property name. The property name, when you're dealing with map layers, is you have to have the property name say layer, and then the property value has to be one of the things in the available layers window. So if I look at available layers, right now the word map, markers, enemy, player, or card are valid entries. So the property name for layer is the word layer, and then these are the different layers that I've assigned. So in order to make this work, I had to add a marker trait with the property name layer, and I gave it the property value map, which is going to put this as part of the map layer, the bottommost of any of the pieces in the game. That's important because when you generate the piece, you want the game piece generated to appear above the button. If you don't do that, sometimes the game piece will appear under the button, which can be very awkward and it doesn't look very good. So I've made it so it doesn't stack. Can't move the piece, but you can select it normally. I've given it the map layer. There's something now I've done called an action button. I'll talk about the global key command in just a moment, but let's talk about the action button. If you go down in this list here, you can see that one of the available traits that you can add is an action button trait. Here we go. It's near the top of the list. So action button. If I add one of those, here's all the different things I can put. The description just helps me keep track of what this particular trait does. This trait means that whenever you click on the game piece, it acts like a button. So whenever I click on this game piece, it's going to invoke a key command that I've assigned it. And I've assigned it the key command Control M. So every time I left click on one of these buttons, it will send a Control M throughout the module. Okay, and I'll show you what that does in just a moment. Basically, I'm going to string a sequence of things together with that Control M. But that's the starting point for a process that's going to deliver a game piece from a deck into a precise location that I've designed for. Now, this is very important. The button X offset and Y offset, what is that all about? Well, to best understand that, look at the bottom two fields, button width and button height. The game piece that I have used to be the button in this game is exactly 87 by 87 pixels. Okay, it's very important to know the exact dimension in pixels of the image that you're using for your draw card or draw piece button. So if the piece that you're using is 100 pixels by 100 pixels, you'd put 100 by 100. Now the X offset is whatever this value is. The X offset is the width. So button X offset is the width divided by 2 and given a negative value. So since the width is 87, I've given the X offset minus 43, which is half of 87 rounded down. I could have put minus 44 and I would have been safe there too. But basically you want to get it as close to 1/2. It's got to be a whole number. Half the size of the width will be your X offset, and it needs to be a negative number. The Y offset, again, is the half size. It's 1/2 of the height and also given a negative number. So the width is 87, height is 87, and the offsets are minus 43 in both fields. What this does, it means that if you click anywhere in that appropriate vicinity around that game piece, it will do exactly what I want it to do. All right, so I've given the action button trait here to this button. Now, global key command. This is a big one. Global key commands can be added. Let me show you where you can add that. It's actually in the available traits near the bottom. In fact, it's one of the bottommost. It is the bottommost. No, not that's set global property. It's toward the bottom. Global key command. All right, that's the one you're going to want to use here. That's what I've added. Now what this does, it allows me a description, and what I've done is I've given it a description to remind me exactly what this particular trait does. So what this trait does is it's going to invoke a command to send a man counter to this particular space. Well, in this case it's actually a woman, so I can change the text to woman. Okay, now the command name. I do not want to give it a command name because that means if I right click on the button, it will actually produce a menu. In other words, I would be giving it a right-click function. I don't want to do that. I want it to be able to respond to a key command, but I don't want to give it a command name, so I leave that blank. Now I give it the keyboard command, Control M. Now what does that do? Well, what that means is the action button, remember I told it to invoke the key command, Control M. So whenever I left-click on the button, the action button trait sends a Control M throughout the module. The global key command picks up on the Control M, and then it dispatches a global key command called Alt-Control-Shift-M. Now, I might have explained this awkwardly earlier. Actually, the action button trait, when it says invoke key command, the Control-M, actually that doesn't go through the whole module. That actually just goes through this particular game piece. So the Control-M is only understood by this particular button piece, and that global key command trait picks up on the Control-M, and then it sends the Alt-Control-Shift-M key command throughout the entire module. All right, now here's a big important thing. Matching properties. This Alt-Control-Shift-M will be picked up by any game piece that's been told to respond to it. Okay. Now, what I can do to confine the response is to have a matching property. Matching property. What I've done is I've given this matching property a command. Within the squiggly brackets, I have the word deck name equals the quotation mark and the word women, and then another quotation mark. What that does is deck name is a property in any VASSAL module. So what is going to happen is that's going to confine the Alt-Control-Shift-M. The only pieces that will respond to that command are the pieces that are in the deck that's entitled women. So by putting deck name equals woman, what that means is only the pieces in that deck that has the deck name women will actually respond to that. Now below that there's another very important field. It says within a deck apply to, and there's a drop down box. I have it set to, you can set it to all pieces, which can be a disaster because that'll send the entire deck to that space. No pieces, which I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. I've never used that before. Or you can do fixed number of pieces, and that's what I'm doing here. I've given it fixed number of pieces, and each click of the button will now send one piece to the button. You want to uncheck suppress individual reports because you want the module to be able to report that a game piece has been dispatched. So make sure that both of these checkboxes are unchecked. And we click OK. So let's trace what we're doing. The action button sends a Control-M. The game piece has a global key command that picks up on the Control-M, and it sends out a key command that I've designated Alt-Control-Shift-M. And only the game pieces in the women deck will actually respond to that piece. A couple other things we need to do now. Now, all of that was within the property, a prototype, within the prototype women button. All the women buttons are going to have those particular traits. Now, each individual button, the button for family A is going to have some things that are going to be different from family B. So that's why I have some things in this particular piece independent of the prototype. So everything we've covered so far has been in the prototype women button. All right, now we go down to something else. I've added a marker to this particular button for family A's woman, and what that is, I've given it the property name destination. That's just the word I picked. I gave it a property value WA. That, for me, that stands for woman and family A. Okay, the simpler you go with this stuff, the easier it's going to be to remember things. So I just go with destination WA. Now, before I explain what this final thing is in the button, I need to show you something else you can do in a module, and that is you can create something known as global properties. Now, you're going to find global property folders within main map windows. See, there's global properties here. But it's going to work best if you use the global properties folder that is at the very root of your module. Within that, you right-click and you choose to add a global property, like I've done, and I've added a global property called button location. I've not given it an initial value, nor have I given it a description, or have I checked that it's numeric. Okay, I've left all of those blank. Basically what this does is it creates a variable that the module is going to be able to respond to. Okay, so I've created that at the core of the module. Now back to that button piece. I have added a trait called set global property. That's the bottommost of the available traits. I've added that in here. And what I've done to it is I've given it a description that will tell me what this button does. It reminds me what the thing does. All right, so this particular trait is going to set the button location property. Okay, remember that global property that I added here? Let me go back to here. I added a property called button location. Now, in the global property that I'm adding here to the button, I've given it the description: set button location property. That's what this thing's going to do. The next field, global property name. I've got the word written button location, and I have it written exactly as the global property that I created at the root level of the module. It's going to locate the property starting in the, you can have it start in the current zone, current map module. I don't ever mess with that. I just leave that thing alone. This is not a numeric property, so I have this unchecked. Now, the next thing I do is the key commands that are going to actually set the global property. What I've done with this is I have a menu command field that is empty. You'll have to delete everything in here. You don't want any text in here. Okay, otherwise that creates a right-click pop-up menu, and you don't want that on your button. Next, I have the key command Control M. Now that's the same command that our action button sends out. So at the same time that the action button sends out that, when it sends out that Control M, a couple things are going to happen at the same time. First, it's going to go and invoke a global key command to all the pieces in the women deck. It's going to send out that Control-Alt-Shift-M command. Okay, we already told it to do that. But also, what this thing is going to do is it's going to set the button location property. And what I'm going to do with it is I'm going to, in the type value, the type field here, in this drop-down box, there's a couple options you can do. You can have it prompt the user, prompt to user select from list, increment numeric value. If you're dealing with a number, you can have it increment up or down, or you can have it set directly. So I've told it to set directly, and I've given it a new value called WA. So every time this button is pressed, the action button sends out a Control M. It sends out the global key command, Alt Control Shift M, but also the Control M is picked up by this set global property trait, and it sets the button location property to read the value WA. Okay? Now remember, we set a marker called destination WA. Alright, now here's where everything ties together. The button sends out all these commands. Now we have to tell the game piece to respond to that. So the game piece that we're working with here is actually the women game piece. And the women game piece just are associated with a prototype called women. Now the women, I've given the map layer player, so these pieces are going to be higher level than the map pieces on the map. I've given it a return to deck trait that sends it back to its stack in the out of play box. But here's what's going to interact with that draw game piece button that we created. Send to location. You'll find this in the available traits, maybe about a third of the way down. There it is right there. Send to location. I've given it the description, send to family box. That's what this thing's going to do. I keep the command name blank because I do not want you to be able to right-click on the women counters and see a pop-up menu. Nevertheless, I do want it to respond to a keyboard command. So I leave this command name blank, and then in the keyboard command I put Alt-Control-Shift-M. I just hold those buttons down. Now remember, that global key command sends out that particular keystroke. The game piece is going to pick up on that. If it's in the women deck, it will pick up on the Alt-Control-Shift-M, and then what it's going to do is it's going to send it to the location, because we have a send. It's responding to a send location trait. Now where are we going to send it to? You can send it to a grid location, a named location on the map, a zone on a map, or a region on a map. So it depends on how you've done your grid with your game. In this case, I have found the easiest way to do this is have it sent to another counter. Now remember, your draw card button is actually treated by VASSAL as though it were a counter. So I have it set to draw to another counter selected by properties. So that's enabled. Next, for the property match. Sometimes it's helpful when you're dealing with the programming codes here to click on the little calculator button, because here it will check the syntax of your text here. I've created a global property in VASSAL called button location. We just showed you how that works. Okay. Now remember, when you click the button, it sends out a Control M, and there's a set global property trait in the button that sets that particular property button location to read WA. Now, the button that I'm creating for family A, I've created a marker on there called destination, and I preset it with a value called WA. So what's going to happen is this button, as long as the property button location is equal to the destination property that I've created, then it will respond to the Alt-Control-Shift-M, and it will go to that location. So let's put everything together here and show you exactly what this does. Go ahead and start a new game. And because it happens so fast, I'll try to work you through what takes place. I'm going to left click on this woman. Alright, in a very instant, in a twinkling of an eye, if you will, what happened was a Control M was dispatched when I left clicked. The Control M did two things. Number one, it set the button location property to read WA. It also sent out an Alt-Control-Shift-A key command all the way through the module, but only the pieces that are in the deck that has the deck name women will respond to that. Of all the pieces in the deck, and only one such piece will respond to that. Okay, in this particular deck, one piece responds to that. Only one piece. It'll be the topmost piece. Okay, and that topmost piece says, okay, I got to respond to an Alt-Control-Shift-M. What's that going to do? It's going to send me to a location. What location? Another game piece somewhere in the module, and that game piece has got to have a property called destination that is equal to the same value that the button location global property has. Okay? The destination property is only according to whatever I put on the particular draw button. Okay? So for this particular button here, I pre-designated it to have the value WA. This button is going to have destination equals WB. All right? That's why when I click on this, it automatically knows not to send the piece over here, because button location equals WA, so it's going to send it over to here. So when I create the button for family B, this is what I'm going to do. Close out of here. What I'm going to do for family B, because I've created so many prototypes, this is going to be a relatively easy, an easy thing. Once you get the first button working, then I'm going to right-click on this at Start Stack here for the Family A Woman Draw button. I'm going to right-click on that Start Stack. I'm going to choose to copy. Go up here to the main folder, right-click and choose to paste. All right, now I have two at Start Stacks. The bottommost one here, I'm going to go ahead and change the name to Family B Woman. I need to put the game piece in the right spot, so I'm going to hit Reposition Stack. And I can see my my tiny little square moving. And I'm going to use the Shift keys to move it right there. I'll use just the arrows without Shift and Control to fine-tune the movement to put it right there, hovering over the graphic image on the map. I click OK. It sets the XY coordinates according to how I positioned, and I click OK. So we have the button in the right spot, and now I need to double-click on the button piece. I don't need to change the prototype woman button. That's already set. Those are global things. It's going to do the Control M. Whenever I click, it's going to send the Control M out. The Control M is going to send out the global key command. That's what the prototype is going to do. Marker destination. I don't want this to say WA. I need it to say WB. And set global property. What I need for this to do is when I click on the piece, I need it for it to change the global property to equal the same thing, WB, as the designated marker here, destination. So I need the global property value to equal the property that's unique to this particular game piece that has the word destination. All right, so destination property WB, global property equals WB. That's all I need to do. Click OK, fire this thing up, and we'll go ahead and left click on it, and what do you know? It sends the piece to exactly to family B. It doesn't send it to WA. I click on WA, it sends the piece to WA, to the A family buttons. So that is how you create the buttons that will dispatch pieces. And this technique will work with sending cards into your hand from a deck. If the deck is set to auto shuffle, then whenever it dispatches the piece, it will be a random piece, not necessarily the topmost piece in the particular deck that you're working with. So, I'm Joel Toppen. Hopefully you found this particular advanced teaching on how to program in VASSAL. I found this to be helpful.